Hey everybody, ronarray here, and my league start with Smite Slayer went absolutely great. I jumped up to tier 16 pretty fast and started to farm tier 17 as well. So in this video, I want to do a proper update showcasing my setup that I'm currently using to farm tier 17s. The build currently feels pretty good because right now you're feeling pretty tanky even in proper tier 17 maps. You can kill bosses, you can clear maps themselves, and amount of damage the build can showcase is pretty high as well. I'm going to also showcase additional tags that we are utilizing at Merc, how you can get additional damage, and what you will need to change to feel tankier in the maps. Part of that will be a little more expensive, and I'm going to showcase which items to get first and which you will be able to get later on if you're focusing on something like that. So in this build variation, I'm also using the Saviour sword. But the price for the Saviour right now is very unstable. It could jump to an absurd amount of money such as 50 divines. So just in case if Saviour is too expensive for you, or if the price for it jumped again, I'm going to add a separate path of building without the Saviour, and also quickly explain later in this video what you can use instead of the Saviour if you can't afford it or if you can't buy it for any reason. Hope it will be helpful for you. So first off, let's talk about the items that I changed and what in my opinion is going to work best. Since currently we can't properly use Doriani on our character because it's much better to just use it on a Merc. I showcased it in a separate video and you will be able to check it both in the description and in the pinned comment. So right now I think going for dual wielding is pretty great idea. While dual wielding we will be able to utilize the Saviour, because Saviour is practically giving you reflection, which is most of the time just doubling your damage. So reflection is going to appear and it's just going to hit enemies, and it's literally doubling your damage in the most cases. Unfortunately, reflection currently is not hitting enemies twice with smite, at least 99% of the time. So we're going to have only triple damage because of smite hitting twice and once based on the reflection. On top of it, at the second hand, we're going to use a Paradoxica Vaal Rapier. Paradoxica right now is a pretty good option because it provides attacks with this weapon deal double damage. It also can give penetrate and attack speed, which is feeling pretty good. Dexterity and intelligence is also pretty nice. We don't really need dexterity that much, but getting intelligence here is heavily recommended. So first item that I heavily recommend to get for you is Paradoxica, because that way it's going to work much better. If you don't have the Saviour, which is absolutely alright, Saviour right now could be a little too expensive. You just need to buy a rare foil. You can get additional bonuses here for additional damage or critical strike chance or critical strike multiplier, but it's not too important. And in the future, when Saviours will drop in price, which will definitely happen, I heavily recommend to get the Saviour. After that, I also changed my helmet. Right now, I'm not using Abyssus Bergenet anymore because I think for tier 17 it's making you a little too squishy. So instead, I'm just running basic helmet with suppression, intelligence, accuracy, and maximum life, which is pretty great, especially the accuracy part. Make sure that you have accuracy on your helmet because it's going to make the situation much better for you. Reduced mana cost of attacks as an implicit, helping a lot, so you'll just need to roll Searing Exarch and Eater of World modifiers. Don't really focus too much on Eater of World, I mostly rolled it for the future, but Searing Exarch by itself is pretty important because reduced mana cost of attacks is very good. And next part, what I changed. We are currently using Yoke of Suffering. Yoke of Suffering is providing very good bonus damage. In almost all cases, enemies take 10% increased damage for each type of element you have inflicted on them, which is very good for us. At least we can shock, we can apply bleeding, we can also apply poison. So I dropped Anger completely out of the build, and right now my auras is Skitter Boots together with Flash and Stone together with Precision. That way we will be able to utilize amount of elements on enemies and it's going to be much more comfortable. If you can get particular resistances, it would be better, and I don't really recommend to overpay for getting 10% here instead of 6 or 7. Your damage is going to be fine anyway. As Annoyed, I heavily recommend Frenetic, because Frenetic is going to give us both survivability from endurance charges and just damage from frenzy charges. Another interesting setup which I changed is using one additional ring for stats. Before, I've been using both rings for accuracy, but since right now we're using like accuracy helmet, we can run basic ring with just like strength and intelligence. That way, you can get like non-channeling skills mana cost, some resistances perfectly for chaos, and STR together with intelligence too. My second ring is still the same, so just accuracy, life, and basic stuff like that. Another very important part that I changed, and in my opinion, which helping me a lot to survive, especially in tier 17s, is my body armor. So for body armor, you need to focus on getting chance to suppress spell damage if you need it, together with additional physical damage reduction, and on top of it, as high armor and evasion as you can get. So I currently have about 2000 armor and 2000 evasion rating, which is pretty great, but you can get even more, up to like 2700 usually, which could be very good as well. And another important part, you will get Fortify from Eater of World modifier on your body armor, so melee hits have 11% chance to fortify, so it's pretty important right here, try to roll it. It could take more rolls or less rolls, but it's still heavily recommended. So my gloves pretty much stay the same, nothing changed about those, and as the boots, I'm still using basic boots as before with like chance to suppress spell damage, but in the future I will replace those boots for Rally Cash with endurance charges bonuses, because it's going to provide a lot of convenience. So I heavily recommend that too. And another interesting part, since currently we're mostly relying on just basic lightning damage, I dropped Trinity out of the build completely, so we're using Awakened added lightning damage together with Inspiration, elemental damage with attacks, multi-strike, increased criticals, and smite. Another interesting topic is Vaal Smite. I think Vaal Smite right now could be recommended, so I really recommend you to just like add it to the build and try, especially if you're running the normal one. And Smite of a Divine Judgement could be an option too, it's mostly providing like a little better range and clear, but I'm feeling absolutely fine with a normal Smite. Getting Vaal probably is my next step right here. And for the rest of the build, we're currently using Summon Skitter Boats together with Unbound Element support, so if you have enough mana, I heavily recommend that too. You can also add like Clarity or Vitality if you need like a little more recovery in the maps, but most of the time it's not too necessary. And important part is Enduring Cry as well. Since a lot of people have been asking how you're generating charges when you're like fighting bosses, mostly endurance charges. So you just need to click Endurance Cry when you're fighting the boss, and that will be it in the most cases. So if you're like close enough, you're going to generate endurance charges and you're going to survive better. Another important part of our damage right here is Prismatic Tincture of Unleashing. Perfectly, you need to have like elemental damage with melee weapons together with melee weapon damage penetrates elemental resistances right here. That way, it's going to be very comfortable for you, and you will deal much more damage when you are just using the tincture. I'm using the tincture almost always in maps, and it's feeling pretty nice. So what to do if you just don't have the Saviour? That's a pretty interesting question. Instead of running the Saviour, you can just use a basic one-handed foil with attacks with this weapon penetrates elemental resistances, some critical strike, multiplier, and attack speed. If you need, you can also craft hits can be evaded on that weapon if you have like issues with accuracy. If you don't, just use a basic weapon like that. It should cost anything between like 50 chaoses up to 2 divines. And your damage with that setup will be only a little lower than the Saviour. So like 41 million of full DPS, which is like double smite, compared to literally 50 million that Saviour has. So if you don't have the Saviour, don't worry about that. That should be the last item that you need to get, because otherwise you could just run normal Rare Sword and you're going to be absolutely fine with it. And let's talk about the tree right now, because tree changed as well. To cap the block, I went to the right and I took all that path with Feline Swiftness. And right now, I also took like additional parts for charges in both cases, don't forget the mastery for charge duration. I went to the right, and since I got like more suppression on the helmet, right here I dropped quick step. If you still need it to be capped on spell suppression, keep using it, but I don't really need that right now, so I just dropped it completely. You can also take like additional socket here, and usually for sockets I recommend like jewels with some attack speed, global critical strike multiplier, or critical strike multiplier in general, and perfectly with life. Mine here, there's like no life on that, so I'm probably going to replace it soon. Another important part, like I added 2 masteries, it's prevent 3% of spell suppression, and you take 30% reduced extra damage from critical strikes. I think it's helping a lot not to die in like bad occasions and stuff like that. So there's also a cool mastery at the block. You have 2 options, 20% life gain when you block or plus 1% chance to block spell damage. You need to experiment with that and see what's working better at your build. If you don't have a lot of items, I really believe that 20% or like 20 life gained when you block is better idea. But if your build is closer to endgame such as mine and you're already farming like tier 17s, I believe that additional chance for block is better. So generally, you should have like around 65% chance to block and 63% chance to block spell damage. Since you're currently using just like Yoke of Suffering, there could be a question how to apply poison to an enemy. And currently you have basically 2 options. You can spend a point right here, 15% chance to poison hits with attacks. It's going to eat 1 point, but it's practically free. Or you can just take that passive note with intelligence and use Tattoo of Stalhalla Shaman. That way it will give you 5% chance to poison on hit, so here I'm doing that. And you always will have your poison up, especially when you're fighting bosses. In the tree, there also been like another small change that I did. So I changed those 2 points into going like that with additional life and evasion rating and armor. Since your body armor together with your helmet should provide a lot of armor and evasion rating, you should be able to get higher evasion rating and armor with both those points, and you can reach a pretty comfortable like 40% chance to evade attacks and approximately like 50% of physical damage reduction. Since you're not using Borganet anymore, you're going to withstand all physical damage significantly better. So with such approach to the build, you should feel pretty good right now and there shouldn't be a lot of issues. However, I still recommend when you're picking like particular tier 17s, I still recommend to try and avoid crazy damage bonuses, especially if you're going to fight the bosses. Because if you're going to roll like boss possessed and 200% damage for that boss, probably it's going to kill you. So use basic logic and not run too heavy tier 17s, even if it's providing a pretty good bonus on the first glance. So another interesting topic is how to calculate the DPS and path of building. First off, you need to make sure that you have a Merc mods applied. Nearby enemies have minus 167% lightning resistance and your damage with hits is lucky. That's pretty much the biggest bonuses that Merc can currently provide. My Merc is also providing Wrath, and I heavily recommend a Merc that can provide Wrath if you currently don't have enough mana to just feed the Wrath in. In that case, just make sure that you have like Blinding, Poison, Shield from Skitterbots, Shock from Skitterbots, and you can also add like Sapped Ground, because I have it on the boots. I think right now adding Sapped Ground could be kinda questionable because you're not hitting it all the time, so I'm probably going to have it deactivated. On average on bosses you will have like from 10 to 15 rage because it's very hard to get like the maximum rage too, so setup is going to look like that. Make sure you have activated Merc modes. My mana is currently negative because I added Wrath in here and it's providing like 30% approximate damage, so I think it's a pretty nice step forward, but it's actually free because it's coming from the Merc. That way your smite should hit approximately for 14 millions with my setup right now. But here comes the big deal. First off, we are hitting with Smite 2 times. So that way, just Smite itself is going to be like 23 millions of damage approximately. And 1 time, you're also hitting from the Saviour. So, based on my experience, Saviour is hitting enemy only 1 time, so you're going to receive like 11 millions from that. And in the end, you also have like a current DPS, so your full DPS will be approximately like 40 millions with that setup. And it's more than enough for almost all content that we are currently encountering. So if you're calculating your own damage in PoE, make sure that you have all the mods. And let's look on the Merc once again. I did a separate video showcasing how it's working, But long story short, you just need to run Durianis, you need to run 2 rings with minus lightning resistances, Perkville Store, and perfectly if you like Wrath on him. I'm also running like a Mortal Flash, and most of the time my Merc is surviving alright. I think Dying Breath could be a nice bonus too, because it will give 18% of increased effect of non-curse auras for your Wrath, and also 18% of increased damage, which is nice even if it's not too big. So let's imagine you currently don't have enough currency and you're thinking from which items you should start. So first off, I would probably recommend to run Paradoxica and like a rare weapon. After that, focus on getting good rares, starting with a body armor and helmet for yourself. After you get body armor and helmet, you can focus on either Yoke or the Saviour. That depends on the pricing. Yoke will keep falling in price after that, so it's definitely recommended to wait a little to buy it. Saviour, there's like not a lot of them on the market, so you can get it later too. So I would probably get Yoke first if you have more currency, but keep the order first of Paradoxica and rare weapon, then just like rare helmet, rare body armor, after that changing the rest of the rares, then going for Yoke and then for Saviour. That's pretty much the setup that you should currently follow. Also make sure that you have like a decent jewels in your build and it's working for you at some level. You should have approximately like closer to 4k life right now together with cap block, cap suppression, and that's how you're going to survive in the most uncomfortable situations. Make sure that you're also always using the tinctures I showcased and you should be fine. So that's been like my update for Smite. I think the build is going alright and you can currently tackle with such setup almost all challenges in the game. I will still keep updating it and probably will push it to proper Ubers and will improve the damage even further, so stay tuned for those. Thank you very much for watching as usual and see you next time. ronarray out.